Hello, everybody, my lovelies, and welcome back to Chapter 10 of Roald Dahl's Matilda. Today we tackle the chapter entitled Throwing the Hammer. Here we go. The nice thing about Matilda was that if you had met her casually and talked to her, you would have thought she was a perfectly normal 5.5-year-old child. She displayed almost no outward signs of her brilliance, and she never showed off. This is a very sensible and quiet little girl, you would have said to yourself, and unless for some reason you had started the discussion with her about literature or mathematics, you would never have known the extent of her brain power. It was therefore easy for Matilda to make friends with other children. All those in her class liked her. They knew, of course, that she was clever, but because they had heard her being questioned by Miss Honey on the first day of term, and they knew also that she was allowed to sit quietly with a book during lessons and not pay attention to the teacher. But children of their age do not search for deeper reasons. They're far too wrapped up in their own small struggles to worry overmuch about what others are doing and why. Among Matilda's new friends was the girl called Lavender. Right from the first day of term, the two of them started wandering round together during the morning break and in the lunch hour. Lavender was exceptionally small for her age. A skinny little nymph with deep brown eyes and with hair dark and cut in a fringe across her forehead. Matilda liked her because she was gusty and adventurous. She liked Matilda for exactly the same reasons. Before the first week of term was up, awesome tales about the head mistress, Miss Trunchbull, began to filter through to newcomers. Matilda and Lavender, standing in a corner of the playground during morning break on the third day, were approached by a rugged 10-year-old with a boil on her nose called Hortensia. New scum, I suppose, Hortensia said to them, looking down from her great height. She was eating from an extra large bag of potato crisps and digging the stuff out in handfuls. Welcome to Bristol, she added, spraying bits of crisp out of her mouth like snowflakes. The two tiny ones, confronted by this giant, kept a watchful eye in silence. Have you met the Trunchbull yet? Hortensia asked. We've seen her at prayers, Lavender said, but we haven't met her. Oh, you're in for a treat. That's what's coming to you, Hortensia said. She hates very small children. She therefore loathes the bottom class and everyone in it. She thinks 5-year-olds are grubs that haven't yet hatched out. In went another fistful of crisps, and when she spoke again, out sprayed crumbs. If you survive your first year, you may just manage to live through the rest of your time here. There she is. Look at that height difference and all those crisps being sprayed. But many don't survive. They get carried out on stretchers screaming, I've seen it. Hortensia paused to observe the effect of these remarks and what they were having on these two tiny ones. Not very much. They seemed pretty cool, so the large one decided to regale them with further information. I suppose you know the Trunchbull has a locked-up cupboard in her private quarters called the Chokey. Have you heard about the Chokey? Matilda and Lavender shook their heads and continued to gaze up at this giant. Being very small, they were inclined to mistrust any creature that was larger than they were, especially senior girls. The Chokey, Hortensia went on, is a very large and tall but narrow cupboard. The floor is only 10 inches of a square, so you can't sit down or squat in it. You have to stand. And 3 of the walls are made of cement with bits of broken glass sticking out all over, so you can't lean against them. You have to stand more or less at attention the entire time when you get locked up in there. It's terrible. Can't you lean against the door? Matilda asked. Don't be daft, Hortensia said. The door's got like thousands of sharp, spiky nails sticking out of it. They've been hammered through from the other side, probably by the Trunchbull herself. Have you been in there? Lavender asked. My first term, I was in there 6 times, Hortensia said. Twice for a whole day, and the other 3 times for 2 hours each. But 2 hours is quite bad enough. It's pitch dark in there when you have to stand up dead straight. And if you wobble at all, you get spiked on either side by the glass walls or the nails on the door. Well, why were you put in there? Matilda asked. What had you done? The first time, Hortensia said, I poured half a tin of golden syrup on the seat of the chair the Trunchbull was going to sit on at prayers. It was wonderful. When she lowered herself onto the chair, it made this loud squelching noise. Similar to that sound made by a hippopotamus when it's lowering its foot into a mud on the banks of the Limpopo River. But you're too small and stupid to have read Just So stories, aren't you? Oh, I've read them, Matilda said. You're a liar, Hortensia said amiably. You can't have read that yet, but no matter. So when the Trunchbull sat down the golden syrup, the squelch was beautiful. And when she jumped up again, the chair sort of like stuck to the seat of those awful green breeches that she wears and came up with her for a few seconds until the thick syrup slowly came unstuck. Then she collapsed her hands to the seat of her breeches, and both hands were covered in the muck. You should have seen her and heard how loud she bellowed. But how did she know it was you? Lavender asked. A little squirt called Ollie Bogwhistle sneaked on me, Hortensia said. I knocked out his front teeth. And the Trunchbull put you in the chokey for a whole day? Matilda asked, gulping. All day long, Hortensia said. I was off my rocker when she let me out. I was babbling like an idiot. What were the other things that you got put in the chokey for? Lavender asked. Oh, I can't remember them all now, Hortensia said. She spoke with an air of an old warrior who had been in so many battles that bravery had become commonplace. It was all so long ago, she added, stuffing more crisps into her mouth. Ah, yes, I can remember one. Here's what happened. I chose a time when I knew the Trunchbull was out of the way teaching the sixth formers, and I put up my hand and I asked to go to the bogs bathroom. But instead of going there, I sneaked into the Trunchbull's room, and after a speedy search, I found the drawers where she kept all of her gym knickers. Go on, Matilda said, spellbound. What happened next? I had sent away by post, you see, for this very powerful itching powder, Hortensia said. It cost 50p a packet and was called the Skin Scorcher. The label said it was made from the powdered teeth of deadly snakes, and it was guaranteed to raise wealth the size of walnuts on your skin. So I sprinkled the stuff inside of a pair of knickers in the drawer and then folded them up again carefully. Hortensia paused to cram more crisps in her mouth. Did it work? Lavender asked. There she is, putting that powder in those knickers. Well, Hortensia said, a few days later, during prayers, the Trunchbull suddenly started scratching herself like mad down there. Aha! I said to myself, here we go. She changed for Jim already. It was pretty wonderful to be sitting there watching it all, knowing that I was the only person in the whole entire school who realized exactly what was going on inside the Trunchbull's pants. And I felt safe, too. I knew I couldn't be caught this time. Then the scratching got worse. She couldn't stop. Nah, she must have thought it was wasp nests down there or something. And then, right in the middle of the Lord's Prayer, she leapt up and grabbed her bottom and rushed out of the room. Both Matilda and Lavender were enthralled. It was quite clear to them that they were at this moment standing in the presence of a master. Here was somebody who had brought the art of skullduggery to the highest point of perfection. Somebody, moreover, who was willing to risk life and limb in pursuit of her calling. They gazed in wonder at this goddess, and suddenly even the boil on her nose was no longer a blemish, but a badge of courage. But how did she catch you that time? Lavender asked, breathless with wonder. She did, Hortensia said, but I got dead in the chokey just the same. Why? They both asked. The Trunchbull, Hortensia said, has a nasty habit of guessing. When she doesn't know who the culprit is, she just makes a guess at it. And the trouble is, she's often right. I was the prime suspect that time because of the golden syrup job, and although I knew she didn't have any proof, nothing I said made any difference. I kept shouting, "How could I have done it, Miss Trunchbull? I didn't even know you kept your spare knickers at school. I didn't even know what itching powder is, and I've never heard of it." But the lying didn't help me in spite of all the great performance that I put on. The Trunchbull simply grabbed me by one ear and rushed me to the chokey at the double and threw me inside and locked the door. That was my second all-day stretch. It was an absolute torture. I was spiked and cut all over when I came out. It's like war, Matilda said, overawed. You're darn right it's like war, Hortensia cried, and the casualties are terrific. We are the Crusaders, the gallant army fighting for our lives with hardly any weapons at all, and the Trunchbull is the Prince of Darkness, the foul serpent, the fiery dragon with all the weapons at her command. It's a tough life. We all try to support each other. You can rely on us, Lavender said, making her height of 3 feet 2 inches stretch as tall as possible. No, I can't, Hortensia said. You're only strips, but you never know. We may find use for you one day in an undercover job. Tell us just a little bit more about what she does, Matilda said. Please do. I mustn't frighten you before you've been here for a week, Hortensia said. You won't, Lavender said. We may be small, but we're quite tough. Listen to this, Hortensia said. Only yesterday, the Trunchbull caught a boy called Julius Rottenwinkle eating licorice. All sorts during the scripture lesson, and she simply picked him up by one arm and flung him clear out an open classroom window. Our classroom's on one floor up, and she saw Julius Rotwinkle go sailing out over the garden like a frisbee and landing with a thump in the middle of the lettuces. Then the Trunchbull turned to us and said, from now on, anybody caught eating in class, go straight out the window. Did Julius Rotwinkle break any bones? Lavender asked. Only a few, Hortensia said. You gotta remember that the Trunchbull once threw the hammer for Britain in the Olympics, so she's very proud of her right arm. What's throwing the hammer? Lavender asked. The hammer? Hortensia said, is actually a ruddy great cannonball at the end of a long bit of wire, and the thrower whisks it round and round, hits her head faster and faster, and then lets it go. You have to be terrifically strong. The Trunchbull will throw anything around just to keep her arm, especially children. Good heavens, Lavender said. Once I heard her say, Hortensia went on, that a large boy is about the same weight. Hold on, I gotta show this picture. He goes flying out the window. A large boy is about the same weight as the Olympic hammer, and therefore he's very useful in practicing with. At that point, something strange happened. The playground, which up to then had been filled with shrieks and shouting of children at play, all at once became silent as a grave. Watch out! Hortensia whispered. Matilda and Lavender glanced around and saw a gigantic figure, Miss Trunchbull, advancing through the crowd of boys and girls with menacing strides. The children drew back hastily to let through, and her progress went across the asphalt like that of Moses going through the Red Sea when the waters parted. A formidable figure she was, too, in her belted smock and green breeches. Below the knees, her half-calf muscles stood out like grapefruits inside of her stockings. Amanda Fripp! She was shouting. You! Amanda Fripp! Come here! Hold on to your hats, Hortensia whispered. What's going on? Lavender whispered back. That idiot Amanda, Hortensia said, has let her hair grow even longer during the holes, and her mother has plaited it into pigtails. Silly thing to do. Why is that silly? Matilda asked. If there's one thing the Trunchbull can't stand, it's pigtails, Hortensia said. Matilda and Lavender saw the giant in green breeches advancing upon a girl of about 10 who had on a pair of pleated golden pigtails hanging over her shoulders. Each pigtail had a blue satin bow at the end of it, and it all looked very pretty. The girl wearing the pigtails, Amanda Thripp, stood quiet and still, watching the advancing giant. And the expression on her face was one that you might find on the face of a person who's trapped. On the face of a person who is trapped in a field with an enraged bull, which is charging flat out towards her. The girl was glued on the spot, terror-struck, pop-eyed, quivering, knowing for certain that the day of judgment had come to her at last. Miss Trunchbull had now reached the victim and was towering over her. "I want those filthy pigtails off before you come back to school tomorrow," she barked. "Chop them off and throw them in the dustbin. You understand?" Amanda, paralyzed with fright, managed to sputter, "Mommy likes them. She pleats them for me every morning." "Your mummy's a twit!" the Trunchbull bellowed. She pointed her finger the size of a salami at the children's head and shouted, "You look like a rat with a tail coming out of its head." "My mommy thinks I look lovely, Miss Trunchbull," Amanda stuttered, shaking like a blanche-mange. "I don't give a tingus toot what your mummy thinks," the Trunchbull yelled. And with that, she lunged forward and grabbed hold of Amanda's pigtails in her right fist and lifted the girl clear off the ground. Then she started swinging her round and round, her head faster and faster. Amanda was screaming blue murder, and the Trunchbull was yelling, "I'll give you pigtails, you little rat!" "Shades of Olympics," Hortensia murmured. "She's getting up speed now, just like she does with the hammer. 10-1, she's gonna throw her." And now the Trunchbull was leaning back against the weight of the whirling girl and pivoting expertly on her toes, spinning round and round, and soon Amanda Tripp was traveling so fast she became a blur, and suddenly, with a mighty grunt, the Trunchbull let go of the pigtails, and Amanda went sailing like a rocket right across the wire fence of the playground and high up into the sky. Look at that. I don't know, I think it looks kind of fun. "Well thrown, sir!" someone shouted from across the playground, and Matilda, who was mesmerized by the whole crazy affair, saw Amanda Thripp descending on a long, graceful parabola on the playing field and beyond. She landed in the grass and bounced 3 times and finally came to a rest. Then, amazingly, she sat up. She looked a trifle dazed, and who could blame her? But after a minute or so, she just got up on her feet again and tottered back towards the playground. The Trunchbull stood in the playground, dusting off her hands. "Not bad," she said, "considering I'm not in strict training. Not bad at all." Then she strode away. "She's mad," Hortensia said. "But don't the parents complain?" Matilda asked. "Would yours?" Hortensia asked. "I know mine wouldn't. She treats the mothers and fathers just the same as the children, and they're all scared to death of her. I'll be seeing you sometime, you two." And with that, she sauntered away. Look at Amanda, all dazed in the ground. That Trunchbull. What a menace.